welcome everyone. I'm Irini Papadimitriou, a creative director at Future Everything. We are about to start the Future Focus Fragile Worlds session. We started at Future Everything Future Focus in May during the pandemic lockdown, and the idea of the program was to create a space to bring people together, people that we've been working with, but also new faces, to start thinking about the role of art and sharing artistic practices, but also thinking about our world in times of crisis, and not just crisis in terms of the pandemic, but also in terms of ongoing challenges that we've been facing in terms of environmental issues, but also injustice, what has been happening around policing and racial injustice that we've seen the last few months. I'm really excited about having Susie and Victoria and Ayo back, because this session is following from the Art Hack Practice series, which was the launching part of Future Focus. And just to mention what is happening today, this is the second part of a two-part event that is taking place as part of this year's online or actually hybrid festival, the Ars Electronica Festival, and alongside a group of other UK organizations, including the UCA and Serpentine Galleries, Flux, etc. We've decided to create a program to respond to the Ars Electronica themes like ecology, democracy, uncertainty, humanity, etc., that is kind of exploring what is happening right now, but also reflecting a little bit on and interrogate the moment that we are in. Fragile Worlds 2 is bringing together some amazing people that I'm really pleased to have here today. Artist Paolo Cirio, who is also a START Prize he had an honorary mention, and START is one of our partners for the session today. Ayo Damola Tanimowo Okunsende, or Ayo, artist and faculty member at Parsons School of Design in New York. And of course, Susie O'Hara and Victoria Bradbury, who are brilliant curators. Victoria is an artist as well, and academics, and the co-editors of Art Hack Practice, Critical Intersections of Art Innovation and the Maker Movement. Without keeping any more time, I just want to hand over to Susie and Victoria, and who are going to introduce Paolo and Ayo, and look forward to the session and talking to you.
Great, thank you so much, Irini, and hello everyone. I'm really delighted to welcome you all to this timely discussion entitled Fragile Worlds. And very much would like to extend our thanks to Ars Electronica, and of course Irini and her fabulous team at Future Everything for hosting us once again. My name is Susie O'Hara, and I'm a curator and a research fellow at the University of Sunderland in the northeast of England. And through my own research-led curatorial practice, I'm really interested in interrogating those artistic and curatorial forms of practice that generate new knowledge and experiences that can help us deepen our understanding of the role and the impact that artists can play in addressing some of the challenges that are inherent within and across underlying systems that shape our society. These interests have led to many interesting and fruitful collaborations, such as the one with Future Everything, but also it's established a long-standing collaboration with my co-editor, my friend, and my co-host today, Victoria Bradbury. Today's session is an extension of 3 recent future-focused discussions that, as Irini has said, centers around our book entitled Art Hack Practice, Critical Intersections of Art Innovation and the Maker Movement, that was published by Routledge in November 2019, a whole other universe away. Just to explain what the term art hacking means to us, it essentially was an effort from our side to seek to describe new creative practices and value systems that we found were emerging within the dissolving boundary lines between the arts, innovation and society. But at the beginning of this pandemic back in March, we shifted our thinking about this book from a compilation of practices that we found emerging at the periphery of technological advancement to viewing it as a kind of resource, I suppose, that would help us navigate the reality of where we are now. So through these series of discussions for Future Focus, our aspiration was to facilitate conversations that would help us as we collectively reconcile, understand, and try to process our current situations and the way in which we can creatively be productive and could potentially seed and extend future formats for arts production and engagement. So today we will continue our discussion about the evolution of art and technology practices that are emerging during a time of crisis. And I'd like to begin by quoting Cohen Snowick, who's currently moderating the Economia conference over at Baltan Laboratories today and tomorrow. I caught some of his talk earlier, and he opened by stating that the economic system is not only not working, the system is panicking. And I felt this statement could relate to so many architectural systems of political, legal, economic, and cultural control that I feel have been shaping our collective experiences within and across global societies, both now and for decades past. These systems are not working for society. They're not designed to be egalitarian. Rather, they're designed to serve the tiny minority, and they do this exceptionally well. We've all been exposed to exclusionary, extremist, and biased views that these systems promote and that are increasingly being played out across all areas of our everyday lives, pushing many to the margins. In the UK, very recently, we had a recent example that includes the exposure of a societal injustice that usually hides in plain sight. And it came in the form of an explicitly biased algorithmic system that had been applied by Ofqual, the exams regulator, to calculate A-level exam grades. It became very clear very quickly that many of those students attending private and independent schools had seen their grades score, while the downgrading, which had impacted over 40% of students across the UK, had disproportionately affected those attending comprehensive schools, mainstream schools. Many of these students had seen their grades downgraded by 2 or sometimes 3 grades, which obviously had affected many decisions that they were making moving forward. Of course, the government panicked, and in the face of widespread public outrage, did a complete U-turn on using this particular system, which does offer a suggestion that exposing these systems for what they are can affect real change. So no doubt you all have examples of similar situations where systems of control, injustice, and bias have been exposed in explicit ways that reveal fissures and weaknesses in systems that can so often seem impenetrable. But I ask, can art be a catalyst that enables conversations to happen with people outside of our own echo chambers, people who have different views and are on the other side from where we are? Can we change or redesign these systems and infrastructures, or do we need to build systems from scratch? How do we make good use of this power of panic and mobilize collective action to potentially force alternatives? What is our role in establishing new modes of thinking, new ways of seeing, and new contexts for doing in a world demanding radical change? Today, we welcome 2 visionary artists who have approached these impenetrable systems and spaces head on. I am very delighted to welcome Ayo Okasende and Paolo Sirio to talk us through some of their artworks that pick up on these issues and more. Welcome, Ayo. Welcome, Paolo. Over to you, Victoria.
I'm Victoria Bradbury, and I'm assistant professor of new media at the University of North Carolina, Asheville. And I'm a new media artist working with interactive installation and virtual reality. Much of my work, including my 2019 Blue Boar VR project, has centered around the story of an ancestor of mine who was convicted of witchcraft in 1692 Salem, Massachusetts. I've represented her story of having been convicted of turning into a blue boar to discuss false accusations and perspectives of people who are accused versus those who make false accusations within systems of power. Susie and I wanted to give a brief overview of the art hack practice, Future Focus, sessions that we conducted over the summer, starting with our first discussion on the 13th of May, which was called Where Do We Work? This session was a direct response to the fact that many in the arts suddenly found ourselves working from home, while many people had been made redundant or shifted to suddenly being considered essential workers. What emerged from our discussions was a hint of what has been highlighted in these times, such as how we as artists and curators can continue to foster connections between people who have yet to connect. How can we encourage useful interruption in a highly mediated domain? And how can we continue to catalyze the generosity of spirit that flows within communities in the online space? We began to consider how the pandemic has highlighted the significant gap between the digital haves and have-nots, and how the privilege of technological connectivity enables us to rethink artworks by pushing new or existing projects in alternative ways to engage more diverse audiences. Well, our second session was on the 3rd of June, and it was called At Home in the Network. And this one explored our newfound familiarity with online and network spaces and responded to the international outrage to the murder of George Floyd and others at the hands of police. We recognize that the issues and circumstances we are facing at this moment are truly global, while at the same time highly local and personal. We considered the application of democratic technological tools, such as the wiki, as a platform for art within the context of social change. And we talked about how we could utilize absurdity as a catalyst for creativity and as a source for passion, and how through critical art making, we can start to find a language to help articulate those horrors that have no words. Our third session on the 24th of June was called Then and Then, and we were thinking through where we as practitioners go from here. So the first then was for the pre-pandemic past, and the second then was for a future that is yet unknown. In Art Hack Practice, we showcase a practical view of people who are working in between and amongst art, technology, community, commerce, including leveraging maker venues and sites for commercial and creative production. Many of these spaces and practices are collaborative. Many rely on connecting professionals with communities, and many result in interactive objects, experiences, or showcases that require large audiences, in-person audiences. One thing we know about the field known by many names, including new media art or art and technology, is that it is full of practitioners who are quick on their feet and accustomed to pivoting and adapting to new modes of working. We often lead the way into uncharted territories, combinations of software and hardware, and creative configurations of people and media. For decades, we have laid bare the algorithm as an increasingly powerful, performative, and narrative force in our work and social interactions that are mediated by machines. At the same time, we recognize that there is much more to do to address the systemic racism and white supremacy within our field. We have from the outset of the Art Hack Practice project aimed to cast a wide geographic net to bring a globally distributed and excitingly, especially through this series, growing Art Hack Practice community together to share perspectives, including those arising out of the current pandemic and movements for racial equality. Today's discussion will focus on the role of artistic practice at a time of crisis. How can artistic practices that address complex systems be viewed from our current moment? As Susie mentioned, we're delighted to welcome Ayo Ukunsinde and Paolo Chirio, who has been awarded with an honorary mention at the Starts Prize for his work Sociality. Both Paolo and Ayo examine the agency of the artist in relation to technological, legal, and economic and cultural systems, and apply tactical interrogations of media to solicit and affect change by developing opportunities for external actors to engage with the experiences that their work sets into motion. In and amongst their projects, we are offered a glimpse of a possible rewilding of established norms through a rupturing of systems of control. I would first like to welcome Ayo, who will be presenting a series of projects. In his chapter in Art Hack Practice, Ayo frames how his collaborative project with Salome Asega, the IAPO repository, developed across a residency at IBEAM Art and Technology Center and through the Laundromat Project. Ayo discusses the sensitivities that artists encounter as they work between technology and communities while imagining, fabricating, and exhibiting artworks. I will hand it over to Io now to tell you more about his work.
Whoa, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Do that real quick. All right, perfect. Thank you all. It's great to be here to present him. I want to start by looking at work that Shannon Madden has been working on in her essay, All Eyes on the Border. She talks about the border as this sort of discursive subject. She talks about this notion of politics of recognition and how the border makes a subject, and more importantly, how the border is now sort of decentralized. Oh, no, go back, okay. Yeah, and how the border is decentralized. And I've been thinking a lot about this border and the opportunities that borders hold. So thinking about the border as this sort of physical thing is not realistic, right? Because for a border to be a border, it has to have the potentiality for penetration, for rupture. But then also thinking about the border as just spaces for rupture and not decentralized is not enough either. So then thinking about, instead of a border, more of a penumbra, you know, there's nothing that's distinctive about it, that it, especially with biometrics, it sort of decentralizes, diffuse amongst the populace. Then the question becomes, if this is the case, how does one know when they are inside or outside? How does one know whether they're a citizen or not? And how does that system make the alien or make the citizen? But not only borders of physicality, right, but also borders between human and non-human, between life and death, between alien and citizen, past, present, future, this sort of multicellular and unicellular, and the precarity of existence at that border. What I'm arguing is that through practice, that one can queer that one situation at the border. In a sense, just in terms of the politics of recognition, where the border looks at the subject, here we could turn it around so that the subject that's crossing the border could sort of look outwards. So I'm using Dun & Raby's speculative design practice that's a little bit adapted and sort of jump into the future or jump into the past, finding problems, finding solutions, and coming back to the present as a means of critique. So I'm going to show a few projects. One of them is zoomorphic, that looks at, zoomorphic is part of a larger project, wearable devices, wearable biomachines, basically. One has ants, another deals, it's a biometric or it's a bio engine, basically, that you put biological waste into it and it produces electricity and transmits DNA. But we're going to look at zoomorphic for a second. Zoomorphic was a project with Fito Segura where we looked to Drosophila flies as a way of trying to understand their behavior a little bit, wanted to genetically differentiate them and have them almost symbiotically exist with the human, so that we would have them on the body, the temperature of our body would activate their movements. As they move as well, a camera would capture their movement. And from that, it would allow cameras on the headgear to move around. And in essence, sort of seeing differently, seeing these fragmented pieces of the world in the way a fly might. So one could think about each eye would have this, this vision attached. Another piece is sort of living as the alien in a sense, walking around the city in a astronaut suit as an African astronaut from the future, and walking around Brooklyn with this and all different cities that I've lived in. And with this suit has devices that allow for the astronaut to exist in this time space. So there's a device that cleans the air, a device that provides me water and provides me food, and a device that allows me to communicate as I alienate myself, or I create myself as an alien and I walk around the city. So in doing this, one thing that I realized is that it becomes freeing to sort of be to see as the alien. What it does is it elicits questions from others. It allows me to observe as if I'm not actually from here. So I do this practice in a way. It calls on a lot of African masquerade practices, and in a way, by walking this city in this ritualistic practice, I'm moving from one sort of plane of existence to another, and sort of not looking down, but looking from the other side at the locations that I'm walking around in. Finally, I want to talk about Slime Tech Lab, which is a project with Ashley Lewis, whereby we look to Octavia Butler, particularly the Xenogenesis series that she has, that asks the question of what it is that we can learn from slime mold, or what it is we can learn from others, from aliens. So looking at slime mold as the alien and trying to understand, is there something that we can learn from them? So with slime molds are unicellular and multicellular at the same time. They have expressions of about 600 sexes. They could do calculations. So we're looking at slime mold as a way to create collaborative projects with them. So creating these devices that allow slime mold to grow within them. And as the slime mold grows, it makes these connections, and these connections in collaboration with stories that we generate becomes this collaborative project between a non-human species and a human species. So they trigger the stories, and over time, collectively, we create a narrative together. So we've shown these, we've had talks on the Slime Tech Lab at different locations, and had different workshops with them as well over at Jan Space and a Culture Hub. Well, I think for me, what's really important, or what's really significant about all these projects, is that they offer an opportunity not only to try to understand different modes of existence in a way, right? But it offers an opportunity for others to learn as well. So with each of these projects, there's an engagement with others. There's a way of sort of presenting the project in a space that others have to encounter it. And it's really that encountering of the other in this sort of positive way that allows for a reconsideration of what a future might be. And I think that this is particularly important when we look at what's happening now in terms of race, in terms of ecology, in terms of the pandemic, and all of this really asking, isn't it time to redefine the notion of the human, to redefine what it means to be human? And I think the only way that we can understand how to reconfigure the human is to look at the world from the alien perspective, from the penumbra of the border between human and alien species. As Haraway says, it matters what stories we make, right? And what worlds make those stories. And that's what I got.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Gosh, there's just a lot that I'm really interested in bringing up in the conversation later on. I think that's really fantastic. And I would urge people, again, to take up Irini's offer of dropping questions into the chat that we can weave into our discussion post-presentation. So please do take that on. I'm really delighted to welcome Paolo Sirio to the discussion. Congratulations from myself as well for your honorary mention of the Starts Prize, Paolo. Really well done. And for those of you who don't know, Paolo engages with legal, economic, and cultural systems of information society. His work investigates social fields impacted by the internet, such as privacy, democracy, intellectual property, and finance. You're very, very welcome joining the discussion. I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me present my work with all of you. I will share something which is just really my website, but it has everything, and at least I can introduce some of my work, and I would probably start from this one since we have mentioned it, which was selected for the Starts Prize. It is a project from 2018. It's called Sociality, and in this case, I collected over 20,000 patents concerning internet technology. So basically inventions that have been created, I mean more than created, patented between 2098 to 2018. So 20 years of technology concerning internet. However, what happened that looking at those patents, there were some of them that were very disturbing in terms of like social manipulation and in terms of like, of course, surveillance and so on. In a way, I could really find what is at the root of what we call today polarization, misinformation, addiction, deception, and discrimination, and of course, again, about privacy. Considering that our life shifted definitely more online in the past few months, these technology, these algorithms, interfaces, and devices have even a bigger role in our life, and especially in what we, how we relate to that in our personal life and also in our society. And that's why this project is called Sociality in a way, because this is also the first time in human history that we trying to program ourselves, or to some degree machines are programming us. And sociality is changing, human sociality is changing based on that, and it's also much easier to manipulate sociality. In fact, there are already patents of technologies that are able, or they aim to read our mind and eventually try to manipulate what we think, which is not that far in the future. So what I propose with this project, beside letting everyone know about this kind of technology, is also trying to ban the technology that are too dangerous. And so there is a participatory element where people can browse through this huge database, if you want, which I already organized myself, and I already rated thousands of those patents myself. But I also let everyone to look at those and eventually find some patents that I couldn't see, or like anyway flag whatever they consider too dangerous for humanity. And there are quite a bit. And that also like point to the fact that this is culturally, we need to understand that information technology is something that is dangerous as much as chemicals or biotechnology or nuclear power and so on, which is something new, I would say, for also technologies like us. And has to do with also the notion of ethics and technology, which is also something new. I don't think this is very common now as a topic and theme, but actually just a few years ago it was ethics, and still what means ethics is still like a little bit confusing for many. And that's really the point. What happened is that for 20 years, any coder, any engineer could patent any kind of algorithm without having any, anyone looking at those and say, well, maybe that is not cool to do something like that. So you could literally patent an algorithm that was designed to kill people or to discriminate women or people of color, and those were already actually patented. So you could find already those things there. Now, since few months only, finally the US Patent Office does have a board that look at the ethical issues related to new inventions. And this is happening because also of artificial intelligence, which is even more dangerous and powerful. So what really this point out, this project is like the need of an ecology of technology, which means not all technology is actually something that should exist. And actually not all technology should be allowed. So I propose to ban many of those patterns and practices to have basically, I would say, an environment, a technological environments that protect humanity. And then, yes, and then the idea that we need more regulations in these, around these topics, and these regulations should be much more participatory. So this is pretty much the project, and as you can see, beside the online component, there's a huge database of patents. The installations have been shown in several ways, but mainly by creating this immersive environment where there are hundreds, thousands of prints eventually of all different patents. And nevertheless, I also did some action in the physical world myself by basically posting these pictures, which are the first page or the main page of the patent, the title of the patent, and the number of the patents, and then saying go to the website and ban it, propose to ban it. And I placed those posters in the main US colleges that basically form students to create that technology, but also to regulate that technology. So MIT, of course, Harvard, Stanford, and so on. So I've been quite active in this campaign. And nevertheless, I find these pictures also pretty interesting and funny and beautiful, if you want. Some of them were even like handmade by engineer, or some of them have like just clip art, but the way they have been produced, they're pretty interesting. And so this idea of the ecology and the ecology of technology brings also to the issue of the ecology of information, because I think one thing is the actual, let's say, hardware, the infrastructures that make this information flow. But then there is also the information itself, which could be in form of data or in how it flows between interfaces. And so in this case, is actually an older project, which is pretty much relevant today, which is called Obscurity, and it was done in 2016, but since it was also this campaign, a regulation campaign. It went on for years and years until recently. So in this case is about criminal records in the United States, which are public records. So as many of you know, that in the United States there is a mass incarceration that has been created a huge amount of criminal records for the past 20, 30 years. Millions and millions of records are out there. So if you've been arrested in the United States, one of the arrest record ends up on Google. So every time someone look for you or for your name actually on Google, there would be the first thing coming up would be the criminal record, including the mugshot. And so because of that, many people cannot move on in their life, they cannot find a job. And this affects millions and millions of people who, of course, are also the ones that already don't come from a privileged background. So this is happening because in the United States, there isn't a specific regulation, which is the right to be forgotten, which is something we have in Europe, so that we have this right to remove data that is information from search engines that is basically ruining potentially our life and is not useful to anyone. So these are really to do with the ecology of information, which technically is called content moderation. And this is a very complex issue, especially when it comes down to fake news, or what we see, especially in these days with COVID, when we read like any kind of conspiracy theories becoming viral, or when we hear that Facebook is profiting from hate speech and so on, which it is like amplified by the algorithms, but it's also amplified by the information that is out there and by the people that publish that information, and also by the people that don't want to remove that information, which is a critical point in the United States, where the First Amendment is supposedly allowing information, any type of information, abusive information, be online and circulating without any limits, which create, unfortunately, a lot of harms. And some of this harm is very concrete, like in this case. So here we are just looking at mugshots. I had collected more than 10 millions of this data, and the project is about obfuscating this data. So I basically cloned 6 websites, mugshots sites, and I republished all this data, so name and surname, the mugshots, the location of the arrest, the reason of charges, and so on, but all obfuscated. So when you were looking for someone, you would find data that was not accurate about that person. And at the same time, I was hijacking traffic from those same sites that trying to expose that criminal data and make it revenue, but which is actually, after all, is just really Google that profits by having this sort of information out there, because they do generate traffic, and they are the ones that don't want to remove these criminal records from the internet. Also because they don't want to be accountable for the publishing of that information. And so because of that, I started a campaign for the right to be forgotten in the United States that went on for years, actually. And the entire project also created a community of people, many that started to write me and tell me their story, horrible story of stories of police brutality mainly, but then I also received many stories of harassment of women online, and cyberbullying, and many people suffering because of this. And they were desperate. They couldn't remove anything. Of course, most of that information was false. They didn't commit a crime. They were not what was said, but they couldn't remove that information from Google, which Google was publishing it as the first thing, because the more the information is controversial, the more the algorithm and Google would profit. So this is pretty dramatic. And so with the campaign, I tried to organize the community, and I tried to help these people and create doing kind of campaigning and organizing. And nevertheless, I would say the first backslash wasn't from Google, it was actually from people, very well-educated people at Stanford, that they would tell me, no, it's right to be forgotten, it's very bad for United States and so on, but also people from digital rights organizations in United States, simply because they came from this very privileged background, and they came also from these notions of the internet as a completely free or liberal, really more than free, liberal space where nothing should be removed, nothing should be controlled, and abuse is not really harming people, simply because they never have been harmed by the same information they wanted to keep online. So that was actually pretty disturbing to hear that backslash. But that again was really a cultural issue, was really about how we were understanding what was the internet, which was this fantastic place where we could share and we could meet, and everything was cool and nice. Which instead turned in a machine of social manipulation, surveillance, and abuse. That is most of the case. And that's also what brought me to reflect on very aesthetical issues about information and information ethics in particular. And so how the perception of information can really affect the way we understand those spaces. And also how artists produce works, and they address those issues. And so these are also very cultural and also linguistic issues that, for instance, I try to, let's say, look at as polarities. And polarities in way when we talk about the internet of technology or these new media in terms of like a representation of this field. We often talk in terms of these polarities in a way, not only us, but I mean journalists or whoever engage in these conversations and debates. Usually they talk about freedom and control, private and public, privacy and surveillance look almost the same, be anonymous, but be accountable, reputation scoring. And what I see is that those polarities should be actually broken down, and everything of those issues, those should be seen in context and should be seen as nuances that can actually understood in a much deeper way. So this is just really going to the heart of the issue that I focus on with the aesthetics of information ethics. So I guess this could be the presentation so far. I don't know if you have a question or we can discuss.
Thank you, Paolo. I'm going to hand it over to Irene to make a few comments and ask a question.
Thank you so much both for your really inspiring work and presentations here. Just wanted to share some very quick thoughts as based on what you were saying, and a lot of the stuff that, for example, like, yeah, Ayo, you were talking a lot about the alien kind of, the need of the alien as a catalyst for change. And I've been thinking a lot about identity in terms of how we construct systems in society, and what also Paolo was talking about, algorithmic systems and AI, and thinking about quantification. And it kind of, I couldn't but remember like Frantz Fanon and some of his words in like Black Skin, White Masks, about identity, and how his identity doesn't belong to him. It has been constructed by the white male, the white man. And I feel that there's so much, you know, it's so interesting now to think about how, you know, this new society of controlling systems that we're building, and what Paolo was saying also about, you know, just the right to be forgotten, but thinking about, you know, this kind of like a route that we've taken towards AIification and a monoculture and quantifying everything in society, but also thinking about the adaptation of technological tools that are almost like that existed in the past in a different form. I'm thinking about criminology and the like the work of Alphonse Bertillon, or like Cesare Lombroso, for example, and how this is kind of amplified and brought back with facial recognition now, but also with these systems. But also I'm thinking like, yeah, about the what Gilles Deleuze was saying with the postscript of societies of control, and just building on Foucault and disciplinary societies, and thinking that how technology and what we're building today plays an important role in enabling these new societies of control and quantification, and yeah, and like monocultures as well, and how we could, yeah, what can we do to go beyond that? I know that you've been doing, like both of you have been doing really interesting work, and of course other artists as well, but also at the same time, I'm thinking also that we are in a way, I mean, as Paolo, you were saying about like these, you know, privileged groups that, although they are in this field, they know very well the consequences, but also they just feel that it doesn't affect them. And I'm thinking about how we are creating new divisions and completely, you know, separate worlds in terms of like people who are affected by what we are doing, and also like everyone else who is in a position, although we are aware, but also it doesn't affect us, and we can't even think about these challenges that other groups and communities find. But also I'm just thinking like in a very kind of direct way, and mainly because I'm hoping that we can go away from here with like some actions and some ideas about what can we do, what are we doing next. And especially I'm just saying that because I like as a curator, as an artistic director, as someone who has been in a privileged position to be part of arts organizations that could maybe enable something different to happen, and we working with diverse groups, how likely we are to influence policymakers, how likely we are to kind of to create change from, and like thinking about, you know, taking as a starting point, for example, work that you've been doing, and also thinking that, you know, the work that you are doing as artists is not traditionally thought of, or like for the majority of people don't think of art as a catalyst like that, or just, so the work that you both of you, like Ayo and Paolo, are doing, it's not, you know, it's not what people expect to see in an art space. So yes, I wonder if you could maybe talk about this idea of like catalyst, your position as a catalyst and your work as a catalyst, and how we could, yeah, just move from these different bubbles, from like people who who are influenced and by these systems, but also people who are not getting into that position, because we are all, you know, it's really hard to go from one reality to the other, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing is Sarah Pink in digital design anthropology talks about this need to sort of take anthropology and sort of create a future anthropology. So looking into the future with anthropology to try to understand future cultures. And I think part of what needs to be done is that looking into the future, but looking into the future not in a way of, okay, the singular artist, the sort of the technical genius that sort of predicts the future, but a communal understanding of what that future is, something that is communal, something that's participatory. And I think the third part of it is allowing that participation to be able to sit in estranged spaces, to be able to call on the weirdness or the queerness of particular conditions that we find ourselves in, to try to generate something, emerge, to emerge something out of it. So for me, I think that that's really the only way that we can, and that itself is a big challenge. You know, if you think about education and pedagogy, and you know the way institutions or within institutions, just thinking about decolonizing design and the efforts that we're doing at Parsons right now to sort of recontextualize the syllabi, the curriculum. And even if we do that, even if we break away from that in the classes, in the department, right, we still have the institution of the university, right? And then even if we break away from that, we still have the institution of capitalism, you know. And going back to Fanon, you know, the question of whether do we just burn it all down? You know, is it actually possible to sort of make that transformation from the inside? Because to be able to make that leap, which is in part to redefine the human, right? To be able to make that leap, it can't just be a few of us. It needs to be all of us. You know, we need to all recognize how these institutions breed inequity, you know, and put ourselves in positions that we can see others, we can be others, to be able to generate a future that is more egalitarian for all of us.
Okay. Fantastic. I think we're going to wrap up, unless I don't think there's any more questions from the chat. But I just wanted to say an amazing thank you. I found that absolutely fantastically insightful. I thought it was a really interesting hour and 15 minutes of my life. I wish I could do it again and we could have 3 hours, but unfortunately we don't. But just thank you so much, Paolo. Thank you so much, Ayo. Irini, as always, it's an absolute joy to work with you and your team in these things. Ars Electronica audience, thank you so much for tuning in. And Victoria, I'll hand over to you to say goodbye. But from me, thank you so much.
A big thank you from me as well, and it's such a pleasure to have all of you here. And just wanted to say that anyone who wants to view again this session, it was live streamed, and Ars Electronica is going to be replaying this on Sunday at some point. I can't remember the time. I've put in the chat the link to our YouTube channel where the session can be found, and it will be on our website. And huge thanks to all of you, and and huge thanks to our audience as well for being here, and to my colleagues for making this happen.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.